Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be cracking open the 22 immutable laws of marketing. We've got our notes and highlights ready, and we're going to pull out those aha moments that make a difference. You've probably heard of this marketing Bible by Al Ries and Jack Trout, but trust me, we're going beyond the surface level here.
It's a classic for a reason. You know these laws, as Rees and Trout call them, they aren't just clever ideas, they're fundamental principles of how marketing really works.
Exactly, and I think anyone who's ever launched a product or tried to get their message out there knows it's not enough to just be good.
Right.
This book dives right into that sometimes uncomfortable truth, starting with the law of leadership. Being first to mind often matters more than being objectively better.
It's like that trivia question. Who was the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic? Most people, they draw a blank, even though Hinkler made the trip after Lindbergh, and arguably with a better flight. But Lindbergh was first, and that's the name etched in our collective memory.
Oh, yeah.
It's more about the story than the specs, right?
It's a powerful illustration of how perception, it trumps reality in marketing. That brings us to the law of the category. If you can't be first in a crowded market, what's the move?
You create a new category altogether where you get to be the pioneer.
Ooh, I like that.
DEC did this brilliantly against IBM. Imagine trying to take on the giant of mainframe computers head on. Instead, DEC created the mini computer category, and boom, they weren't just competing, they were defining the game.
They rewrote the rules. So, lesson one for our listeners, if you're launching something new, the question isn't just, is this good? It's, is this the first of its kind in some way that matters to customers? Now, where it gets really interesting is how deeply ingrained these perceptions become. Right? The law of the mind. Once an idea takes hold in the consumer's mind, it's incredibly hard to change.
Yeah, even if your product has better features or a lower price, if you're battling against an established perception, you're fighting an uphill battle. Think of Xerox. They were the kings of copiers, but that very strength made it difficult for them to break into the personal computer market.
Right, people already had a perception of who Xerox was and what they did.
Exactly. They were battling an invisible force, the customer's pre-existing mental framework. It's like trying to change someone's favorite ice cream flavor. It's about more than just taste, right? It's about memories, emotions, maybe even a sense of identity tied into that preference.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't just logic someone out of that. Right? You can't just tell them, well, this one has less sugar or this one is, more popular now.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't work that way. It's an emotional connection.
And that takes us to the law of perception. You're not marketing a product, you're marketing a perception of that product. Remember, New Coke? Blind taste tests loved it, but loyal Coke drinkers, not so much.
No, they were not having it.
They built an emotional connection with the classic. It was part of their routines, their good times. You can't just replace that with a formula, even if it scores higher in a lab.
So true. It's a great example of how you're not selling a product. You're selling a feeling, an experience, a story that resonates with the customer.
It's about crafting a narrative, and not just any narrative, one that resonates, that sticks in the mind. That's where the law of focus comes in.
Right, so we're not just battling for, shelf space. We're battling for mental real estate. How do we win that battle? I'm intrigued by this idea of owning a word.
Yeah, it's about becoming synonymous with a particular concept or benefit. Think FedEx and overnight. They could have tried to be all things shipping, but they laser focused on that one word, that one need, and dominated the space.
So instead of trying to be on every rung of the ladder, you pick your rung and own it. You become the go-to for that specific thing.
Precisely. But here's the catch. You can't just borrow someone else's word. The law of exclusivity tells us we need to find our own unique attribute to own. Like Volvo already owns safety. Trying to out-Volvo is a losing game.
Right, you have to find your own lane. So how do you figure out what to own, especially if you're not the first one in the market?
That's where the law of the ladder comes in handy. Every customer has a mental ranking of brands within a category, their own personal ladder.
Okay, so for me, when I think streaming service, maybe Netflix is at the top, followed by that one with the documentaries I like. You get the idea.
Precisely. And your marketing strategy should depend on where you stand on those ladders. If you're not number one, you need to acknowledge that, maybe even use it to your advantage.
Like Avis did with We Try Harder. They knew they weren't Hertz, but they turned that into a strength, a reason to choose them over the complacent leader.
Brilliant campaign. And it highlights how understanding the competitive landscape is crucial. The law of duality takes this a step further, suggesting that most markets eventually become a two-horse race.
Coke and Pepsi, McDonald's and Burger King, those classic rivalry.
Exactly. And if you're not one of those top two, you need a laser-focused niche to survive, let alone thrive. So the question becomes, how do you differentiate yourself, especially if you're going up against a dominant leader?
Okay, that's where it gets really strategic. You can't just outdo the leader at their own game, right?
Right. You need to disrupt the game. The law of the opposite suggests doing this by defining yourself against the leader, highlighting what they lack.
Like when Scope went after Listerine's medicine breath by focusing on good taste, they turned a weakness into a strength and effectively flipped the script.
Exactly. It's about understanding customer perceptions and finding that open space in their minds, even if it means going against the grain. Of course, knowing the rules of the game is one thing, but even seasoned players make mistakes.
Oh, I'm sure there are some epic marketing blunders out there. We've all seen them. Campaigns that just missed the mark, products that seemed like a good idea at the time. What are some of the common traps that Rise and Trout warn us about? It's like that saying, you can learn more from failure than from success. So let's dive into those cautionary tales. What are some of the marketing traps that even experienced companies fall into?
One of the biggest is the law of division. It sounds obvious when you hear it. Categories split, they don't merge. Yet companies, they constantly try to be all things to all people.
Yeah, you see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
A brand known for one thing suddenly branching out into something totally different. Does it ever work?
Rarely. Remember when Volkswagen tried to sell both the small economical Beetle A&D, a large luxurious sedan?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about an identity crisis. It diluted their brand and confused customers.
It's a classic case of trying to be on every rung of the ladder all at once. You end up nowhere. Which I guess is why focus is so important, like we talked about with owning a word.
Exactly. And that focus should extend to your long-term strategy as well. The law of perspective warns us about the dangers of short-term thinking. Constant sales and discounts might seem like a good idea to boost immediate revenue.
Yeah, get those numbers up.
But you end up training customers to wait for the next markdown. They get hooked on the deal, not the value.
Right, you're not building loyalty. You're just conditioning them for the next sale.
Exactly. And it cheapens your brand in the long run. Which brings us to another seductive trap. The law of line extension. It seems so logical. You have a successful brand. Why not put its name on everything?
Ah, yes. The infamous A1 poultry sauce syndrome. It's the marketing equivalent of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. The thinking is that you can leverage an established brand's success, but often it just muddies the waters. People associate A1 with steak sauce, not poultry. It's confusing, and it dilutes the core brand identity.
So focus, discipline, those are key. Which, honestly, can be tough in the ever-changing world of marketing. Speaking of tough choices, the law of sacrifice, that's a big one. It says you have to give something up to stand out.
Yeah, you can't be everything to everyone. You might need to sacrifice certain product lines, target audiences, or even the desire to constantly chase the latest trend.
So it's about strategic surrender, as much as it is about winning. Choose your battles, and don't be afraid to say no to things that don't align with your core focus.
It takes discipline. Now let's talk about differentiation. We touched on this with the law of exclusivity, but the law of attributes takes it a step further. It's about finding the opposite attribute to own.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not just about being different. It's about being different in a way that directly challenges the leader.
Exactly. Think Gillette. They built an empire on expensive multi-blade razors, but then they went all in on disposable razors too.
Wow.
A bold move that paid off because they owned both ends of the spectrum.
It's almost counterintuitive. Instead of trying to outdo the competition on their own turf, you flip the script and create a new game altogether.
Precisely. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human element of marketing. Ries and Trout dedicate the last few laws to this crucial aspect.
Okay, because at the end of the day, we're marketing to people, not robots. Emotions, gut feelings, those unconscious biases, they all play a role in how we respond to marketing.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful yet often overlooked laws is the law of candor. It suggests that admitting a weakness can actually strengthen your brand.
Like Avis did with their We Try Harder campaign.
Exactly.
It was a bold move to acknowledge they weren't number one, but it humanized them. People root for the underdog.
It disarmed their audience and made them relatable. It's a great example of turning a perceived negative into a positive. Then there's the law of singularity. One bold move beats a dozen mediocre ones.
It reminds me of that quote, "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy." It's about taking risks, making a statement, even if it ruffles some feathers.
Exactly. And it ties into the law of unpredictability. The one constant in marketing is change. You can't predict the future, but you can build in flexibility.
So stay agile, stay informed, and be ready to pivot when the market throws you a curveball.
Now, here are two laws that are especially relevant for leaders. The law of success can be a double-edged sword. Success often breeds arrogance, and arrogance leads to complacency.
It's easy to get caught up in your own hype, to lose touch with what customers really want. That's when those nimble competitors they smell blood in the water.
And that's when the law of failure becomes your best friend. Not celebrating failure, of course, but embracing it as an opportunity to learn and adapt.
Fail fast, learn, iterate. It's how you stay ahead of the curve.
And finally, two laws that are all about playing the long game. The law of hype warns us to be wary of flashy marketing noise. True breakthroughs rarely arrive with a fanfare.
Substance over style. It's about building something meaningful and sustainable, not chasing the latest fad.
And that leads us to the law of resources. Ideas come first, money follows. Don't let a lack of immediate funding hold you back from pursuing a truly innovative idea.
Because sometimes the best marketing campaigns are the ones that challenge the status quo, not the ones with the biggest budgets.
Exactly. So as you can see, the 22 immutable laws of marketing isn't just a book of rules. It's a framework for thinking about marketing in a whole new way.
It's about understanding the principles of human behavior, the dynamics of competition, and the importance of staying agile in a constantly evolving market.
It's about owning your space, knowing your audience, and never underestimating the power of a well-crafted story.
And it's about remembering that while these laws may be immutable, the ways in which we apply them are limitless. So go out there, challenge the conventions, and create marketing that truly matters.
That's the beauty of this field. It's always evolving, always offering new challenges and opportunities.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to conquer the marketing world, one immutable law at a time. Until next time, keep those marketing minds sharp.